Hi, my name is Emma Chalufia, and I currently work as a technical support engineer at Qlik. So my focus area is, of course, design and development, and I've been working for Qlik for the past 3 years. So to get started, we're just going to look at today's agenda. So to begin with, we're just going to have a brief introduction on how Qlik Sense images are handled in NPrinting. And we just give a live demo and just giving you a back-end overview of how these images are handled, so step by step from the Qlik Sense side and from the NPrinting side. And then we just go through some troubleshooting notes and just explain that a little bit. And then we'll go as well as look at unsupported objects of Qlik Sense images, and as well as things to remember and some Q&A. So to start with, just to give an introduction, is that when you look at how NPrinting handles images from Qlik Sense, that's very different from how QlikView handles those images. So the thing is about with QlikView, it comes with an inbuilt service, which is more of image export, which allows NPrinting to get images. So that way, NPrinting can just get the images as provided by QlikView. So unlike QlikView, Qlik Sense does not have that option. So with that, NPrinting developers came up with the idea of using a tool called Web Renderer. So with that said, just go through the process. So what happens that with Web Renderer is Chromium browser, so it's more of a virtual browser used by NPrinting. So what NPrinting does is that it sends parameters to Chromium. So just let's give an example in a scenario where, for instance, you have a user who let's just call the user one and say user one wants to have a report, and with that report they want to have Qlik Sense images. So for instance, when user one creates a report in NPrinting, the user one may have, for instance, filters created or some sort of formulas created in NPrinting Designer. So what happens with that is that NPrinting takes those parameters which the user specified in NPrinting and passes them on to Chromium. The next step is what Chromium does is that it goes to Qlik Sense. What it does is that when it goes to Qlik Sense, it sort of mimics what user one did and takes those actions into Qlik Sense. So it's acting as a user. It goes and makes exact selections based on certain filters, based on the certain formulas. After it makes the selections and it takes a screenshot of what it sees, what Qlik Sense presents is that it takes a snapshot of that and transfers it back to NPrinting. So in that case, we're going to say if user one created with the correct syntax of filters, correct syntax of formulas, those formulas are then transferred to Web Renderer, and Web Renderer simulates those and takes a screenshot of the result and sends it back to NPrinting. With that said, we're just going to go through a live demo. Our live demo is just going to give us more of a simulation of what Web Renderer looks like from the Qlik Sense side, and also what it looks like from the NPrinting side. The advantage of this is that it allows us to sort of not only see how images look and are handled from both ends, but it also gives us the idea of if the image has been taken from Qlik Sense, for instance, and if that image looks exactly as we want it to look like. And also if NPrinting receives the image and how NPrinting perceives that image. We're going to view the images handled from the Qlik Sense side and the NPrinting side. So the information that we're going to use for troubleshooting, for testing, is available in the support portal. And these are articles that give you guidelines on how to set that up from both Qlik Sense side and NPrinting side. So starting from the Qlik Sense side, we have an article. Of course, the article is going to talk about this error message because this is one of the main error message, which is more of a generic error message from NPrinting, which does not give us a specific error message. So NPrinting team came up with this idea of having to do a step-by-step troubleshoot. So this is the first step of troubleshooting when you get this error message. What do we do on the Qlik Sense side? Is that it's very important that you read all this information for when you're doing the actual troubleshooting, but we're just going to skip to the part where we set up the connection. Setting up the connection. On the Qlik Sense side, we have a JavaScript, and this JavaScript depends on which version of Qlik Sense you have. So if you have Qlik Sense June 2018 and below, this is the kind of setup that you have. From our end, we're going to test in Qlik Sense April. 2019, and we're going to have the same version of NPrinting because it's always recommended to always have the same version. This is just to avoid any incompatibility issues that we may come across. So in that case, we have NPrinting April 2019 and the same for Qlik Sense. And since we have September and higher, this is the setting we're going to use. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a page where we have Qlik Sense service renderer. So this is what the web renderer looks like from the Qlik Sense side. And with that, we're going to have, of course, the application ID and the object ID. And this is then we have, of course, the JavaScript that we're going to run to retrieve that object. So let's get started on that. So just to do the testing, we're going to start with the application that every user has, and that's the License Monitor app. So now we're going to talk about how the web renderer works. With the Qlik Sense, we're just going to use this image. So when we read the article, we talked about getting the image ID. So let's just say, again, user 1 wants to use this object, and we need to get the object ID. So there's a couple of ways of getting the object ID. One of the most obvious ways when you're working with NPrinting, you can easily get that from NPrinting Designer, because of course you can see the object ID once you're adding it to the template editor. One of the other options we have, and we actually have an article specifying this, is that we have the option to go into the developer view of Qlik Sense, and that just requires us to add these two parameters, which is our options and developer to our URL. And with that, when we right click, we have the object ID. And at the same time, up here, we can easily see the application ID. So with that information, we just specify that in our Qlik Print Service renderer. This is the JavaScript that we're going to use to execute. Just to have an overview on how web renderer looks like from the Qlik Sense side, or how it handles the images. Now we've specified the URL, and what you have to do is that once you run the URL, or when you put it the first time, you just have to wait for onReady. So under onReady is where we paste our JavaScript. So once we press enter, here we can see how the image looks like. This is how NPrinting is going to see this image once it's received. And also just to give you another overview, this is how it looks like in Qlik Sense. So as you can see, it may look different, and this is why on our help site we have information on how you can modify the image to look the way you like it to look. And the other important fact to note is that with web renderer is that it takes a screenshot, so it looks at the image as is presented. So if it looks, let's just say we're going to use this image, and we want to see how this image is going to look like from the NPrinting side. So if we copy this ID, and we go back to the script, and we just replace the other image with this. And we just go ahead and run the JavaScript again from the same area. Yep, and we paste it. Say enter. So you see, it doesn't only show us the entire image, because when the screenshot is taken, this is how the image will look like. So useful for you to see how the image will look like and how you can adjust the image to fit the criteria that is expected for you to view it in the NPrinting report as you would like for it to look. So in a nutshell, this is how web renderer works from the Qlik Sense side. And now when we go to the NPrinting side, so we have done the first test. And now we're going to go to do the second test. So with the NPrinting side, we use a tool called benchmark. So with the benchmark, we have the article also in our support portal. And with this one, we have a file, a zip file found in a Dropbox folder. So this is just a link to the file. You just set it up in the C drive. So you just extract that in C drive, and you also extract a folder that's within the benchmark folder. So what are the main parameters to look for when you're setting up a benchmark? You have to put in a domain name and the domain user, as well as the proxy address. And the other thing to also look for is also the application name. So unlike when you're creating an NPrinting connection where you use the application ID, in this case, we're going to use the application name, and as well as the object ID. One other important thing to note is that In some situations, we will go into depth to specify one of the possible issues that we might face. Using the same concept is that in some cases, you might have issues where you have the image appearing once and it doesn't appear sometimes. So this gives you the option to have the image generated more than once. You're able to see when it fails, or if it fails, or if you're able to get the image every time you make a request to Qlik Sense. So with that said, we go to NPrinting. So from our NPrinting side, we have the folder in C drive, and we have all the information that we need. So to make the changes that we specify, we have to go to the config file. And we have our config file open. We have all the information specified accordingly. And we have our, just a moment, we have our application ID and the proxy address, as well as the domain user. And we specified 10 to just see how many images we can generate. And once we make those changes, we just save those changes, and then we go back to the benchmark folder. And with that, we run the Qlik Sense execution file just to see. As it's processing, we're expecting to get 10 images, and this should appear in a temp file also found in the benchmark folder. So this may take some time depending on the connection that you have to Qlik Sense. We have all the image generated, and it tells us completed, and we have no error messages appearing. So with that, we go to the temp folder, and there we have our first 10 images. The other 10 were generated before this demo. So we can say these 10 up to here, and we can just see this is how the image looks like from the NPrinting side. So once added in the report, this is how this image will look like. In a nutshell, this demo just gives us an idea or just a view on how Web Renderer handles these images from the Qlik Sense side and now from the NPrinting side. So for instance, if user 1 is getting an image from the license monitoring app, we're able to view how it looks like from the Qlik Sense side. And if we say user 1 wants to look at the same image and how it looks like from the NPrinting side, and this is how it's going to look like. So if we generate 10 images. So moving on to the next part of our session. So we've made the demo on how that works. So what are the common errors that we tend to get when it comes to NPrinting and Qlik Sense images? The most common error that we had is, of course, the gRPC or CEF error message. This error appears in the NPrinting logs. So this error is quite generic, so that's why it's very important to carry out the first steps, which was the first one, checking if is this on Qlik Sense side or is this on NPrinting side. This helps us understand the source of the data. And the other most important thing is that we have a documentation which gives you step-by-step information. And this information is also found in our support portal. We'll speak a little about that document or give you some information as well as provide it at the end of the presentation. Other issues that we may come across using Qlik Sense images, you might have, for instance, incorrect colors, or the image might be cut. And the other thing that you may experience is sometimes your image is missing. That's why we came up with the idea of, for instance, generating the image more than once to see when it stops or when it's missing. There may be a number of steps that you need to look into when you're troubleshooting. So these are just some of the highlighted details that you look into. For instance, if you're using an HTTP connection in Qlik Sense, you need to make sure that it's set up correctly, as it may not generate the image or you might get an error message. The most important thing is that starting from June of NPrinting 2018, the Web Renderer logs were created. So with the Web Renderer logs is that this is more detailed information, not just getting generic error message, but gives you information on what issues the Web Renderer tool itself ran across. And with that, we're able to specify and say, when you run into any problems images and done the first and second troubleshooting, and that does not help you find out or solve the problem, it's the part where we ask you to create a case to support and provide us the logs found in this location. One of other things that we may also be very useful is to also enable performance logging, because what happens that, for instance, if you have a pretty large Qlik Sense application, it takes a while to render an image. These are issues that you may run into where the image is still loading and Web Renderer has already taken a screenshot of that image. And that way the image comes incomplete or is not fully loaded at all. Speaking of the article where you can find every possible issue that you may run into, based on image and may help you troubleshoot before creating a case-to-click support. This is the main documentation that specifies all the possible issues, or the unsupported features that we may have, or the troubleshooting steps that you need to take into depending on what you're experiencing. So we have mentioned some of these, and this documentation is found on our Qlik support portal. Speaking of unsupported objects, so we have quite a number of unsupported objects, which may include third-party extensions. So with third-party extensions, we do have information on our help site which specifies how to configure third-party extensions. So if third-party extension does not follow the instructions in our help site or any of the configuration information, then you might not be able to use that information. You can find all the information how to set up the third-party extension so that you can use it in the NPrinting report. Some of the other issues that you may run into are Chat Assist enabled charts. So these are the ones that are generated, for instance, using insights in Qlik Sense. So unfortunately, this is a limitation that may cause issues or may not work sometimes within NPrinting. And lastly, one other main thing that you may run into, for instance, if you're generating an object from an external data source. When we talk about unsupported objects, it doesn't necessarily mean that this object will not appear in the NPrinting report. It may be that the object appears in the NPrinting report, or sometimes does not appear, or is not looking as you expect. This is because these are unsupported configurations, or configurations that have not been tested. As a result, you might run into issues, and these are some of the things that we would recommend to avoid including in the NPrinting report. Just a short demo again on the type of issues that you may run into. We're going to jump back to our configurations. We're going to have, for instance, two sheets. In the first sheet, we have two objects that have been generated using the Chat Assist, or which you say Insight. And the first sheet, we have a map. And this map is a geoanalytics map. So this is an extension map which uses an external data source, which in this case is not supported within NPrinting. So we have already created this application, and we have created the connection within NPrinting as well, just to show you which connection. So we have created this as a test, and we have created the connection within NPrinting. At the same time, we have created the report, which is the image test report. Just to begin the services that we stopped, this was for the benchmark text that you have to stop these two services. And you find all this information in the documentation. We have added one of the two images. The first PowerPoint page contains the map, and the second one contains the Chat Assist generated object. So when we hit preview, as we can see, the map has not been generated. It's still loading. Web renderer already went and took a screenshot, and this is one of the reasons why, for instance, some of these objects may not be supported due to such unpredictable reasons. But here's something more interesting. This object is created with Chat Assist, but we're still able to generate the object. It doesn't necessarily mean that we still support it. It could work, but it means that if you run into any issues, to mention that, yeah, this could be the unstable issues that we may not have tested and we do not support as of now. That was just giving you a simple understanding of the possible issues that we may run into and how we handle them at Qlik. Most importantly, once you've run through the process of doing the first process of seeing that the image is generated from Qlik Sense side, and you're seeing that it's working from the NPrinting side, and you're still getting error message, the first thing is to open a case with Qlik support and then provide us the logs found in this location. The other thing to remember is that Web renderer has had quite a lot of improvements from the NPrinting side. So according to developers, that in the near future, that you very rarely need to use any of the tests that we just provided to see if the image is generated correctly. So it has quite a lot of improvements, and this is coming in the coming releases of NPrinting. And lastly, this is just details on how to troubleshoot. We need to emphasize the fact that this article that we mentioned is that it does provide us quite a lot of information that we need to troubleshoot images. It provides us all the necessary steps, all the supported, unsupported objects, and all the proper configurations and the documentation that we need. So it links us to very important information that we need. And lastly, to the Q&A.
Okay, everyone, now it's time for Q&A. Please submit your questions through the Q&A panel on the left side of your ON24 console. Emma, which question would you like to address first?
Okay, so we have quite a few questions, and some of the questions have been addressed within the demonstration. Just let us know if that wasn't clear or you need a specific answer. One of the main questions I was asked was also what CEF error gRPC error message was all about, and as mentioned, this is a generic NPrinting error message, and this troubleshooting session will help you troubleshoot what causes that error message and also get specific logs that we may understand. And if you have any trouble understanding, just create a case in the support portal and we can help you understand your problem. One of the other questions I was asked was how to get better picture quality when exporting Qlik Sense graphs and straight tables. So as we did in the first demo, it gives you an idea on how your image will look like. So we also in our help site with the NPrinting, we have some guidelines on how to have better quality images. For instance, if you have issues with the stretch or the formatting, or just if you have blurry text, we do have information on how you can adjust your images to fit how you'd like them to look within the NPrinting report. Some of the other questions is sometimes when I produce reports that have Qlik Sense checklist image, the image on the report does not show up. It's just is a blank white box. So using the information that we provided, you can easily, for instance, see like when I export from Qlik Sense, am I able to see the image, and is it blank when I export it, see it from the NPrinting side or from the Qlik Sense side? And also, is it a supported image? Does it fit the criteria of an image that should be in the NPrinting report? So these are some of the factors that you need to look into when you're adding an image into an NPrinting from Qlik Sense. And of course, most of the questions specify on quality of images. We do have quite a lot of information with NPrinting explaining how an image should look and how an image should fit into the criteria that it to have the quality that you expect. So for instance, when you have an image and you create a task, it gives you the option. So I can just show you that within NPrinting. So in NPrinting, when you create a task and you create a report, so we're just going to try and use the same image that the same application that we used to test the image. So when you create a report or add a report to NPrinting and create a task to generate that report, for instance, now we had a PowerPoint, you have the options to have a high quality or a normal or very high resolution. This is one way to see the quality of images that you'd like, as well as the quality of the report that you'd like. So this is something that you need to test and run into, as well as search our help site for information on how to specify the quality of images. So if we just go back to our help site, since we're working with April, we just select April and we just check image. So we do have a page specifying image quality and some of the limitations that we have. So if you set up everything as mentioned on this page and you still run into any issues, then you create a case with us and we can run by R&D to see. So when you have, for instance, normal DPI, this is how the image is. This is the setting when you have a normal setting in, for instance, in the task that we just looked at. So these are the settings and the numbers that you have when you for each setting that you select when you're creating the report and specifying the quality of the image. So I hope that's helpful. Otherwise, if you have any issues, please ensure to create a ticket to support and we can help you clarify this. So the other question was also asking how can we find the reference ID of the image. So as specified, you can find the reference ID of an image within Qlik Sense, and that's using the options developers as having developer view, or you can as well find it in the NPrint designer. Aside from having questions about images, we do have other general questions that have to do with NPrinting. So one of the questions is, how do I distribute a report to many recipients filtered for each recipient? So with that, we have settings within NPrinting that allow you to distribute emails to users, and I believe this is the option that allows you to cycle and set conditions that, so you can say specific files to specific users. Sorry, to many recipients. So for instance, if you filter them by group, so a specific group of users receive a specific type of report. And you can also find all this information on our help site as well. And yeah, I guess that's about it. If the information is not clear, please reach out to us and we can just give you more details on this.
Emma, we have time for one last question.
So the last question says, are there any governance enhancements in this release? So assuming this is to do with NPrinting, well, we have not had any information about governance enhancements, but of course, if you've been using NPrinting for a while, we do have some ways of understanding how we use NPrinting, but I'm not so sure if we have anything implemented, but we do have some feature requests that maybe are on the roadmap for the future of NPrinting. And with that said, thank you so much for today's session.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this session. Thanks to Emma for presenting. We always appreciate getting experts like Emma to share with us. Here's our legal disclaimer. And thank you once again. Have a great rest of your day.